Welcome to another show. I am your host, Adam Fraser, and I welcome you to the River Run podcast. Well, we are here. I got to talk about something here real quick. Today, I had seen a post on Instagram regarding a 9-pound smallmouth that has been caught in the St. Lawrence River on the New York side, I believe. Anyways, this thing is huge. It was a post done by the Serious Angler podcast. I'm a big fan of those guys. So shout out to you guys. But there's this 9-pound smallmouth. And this guy is holding this thing up. It is ginormous. And what's really cool about this, and this is the flip of a coin, really, when you think about it, is what do you do when you think you might have a provincial record, a state record, and the deal is that you need to do the following? You either kill the fish and put it on ice, and then at some point in the near future, they'll determine the state will determine, or you let that beast go and you let him swim free, knowing that you might have had a state record. The guy in the post, he had said he would let it go. So I just want to give a shout out, man. Seriously, that's really cool. That's a ginormous fish. Go check it out. It's on the Serious Angler Network, the podcast network. Check them out. Instagram, it's up there. But welcome to the show. Honestly, I thought that was pretty cool. That guy, kind of said, and there was another state record too that was caught, I think, in Indiana, and the guy his main concern was to keep the fish alive, and he did everything in his power, and he was able to re-release it and had a video of it, and so props to those people, seriously. But at the end of the day, I got to give a quick shout out to a fellow Jackson Kayak team member of mine, Henry Vegan. I am a huge fan of the live target crawfish. And Henry and I are constantly always chatting about they're starting to be a crankbait that is you're not going to see very much anymore. I don't see them in a lot of stores, but the stores I do see them in, I buy them. This thing is cool because this is the actual trap one, which I've never seen it up in Canada. I'm sure they had it at some point, but I've never crossed paths with it. This thing's really cool. I just wanted to say, like, if you're a crankbait person and you like throwing craw style crankbaits, the live target was my favorite, and I wish live target would you bring them back out if you're listening, please, because I would be a number one customer, and I think Henry would also be a customer of it. But they have so many cool different patterns, and I don't know, I just think they're just natural, and I don't know, as a craw style crankbait, there's just that look that has it's just you probably fished them, you probably seen them, but very cool. So I just want to say, Henry, thank you very much for the awesome gift, man. I almost don't want to throw it, but I am going to throw it because there's no sense in holding on to tackle unless you're going to throw it. And this thing here is worth getting thrown around. Also, don't forget the River Run podcast and our friends over at Dubro Fishing. Dubro Fishing offers the podcast listeners a run RRUN 10, save 10% at checkout. Go check them out at dubrofishing.com. Don't forget, you can that awesome Do More utility cup holder. It's there. Another reason to use that discount code. And don't forget Canada, they ship to Canada. So at the same time, Dubro Fishing, thank you for the awesome discount. And at the same time, it is one of those things that if you're looking at rod storage or just, your basic kayak layout, or you're into leaders, saltwater, whatnot, Dubro covers a lot. So check them out. They got Dewey plastics there for you too. Yeah. So my guest tonight is, this is cool. My guest is Jameson Redding. You might know him as the road trip angler. He is, on TV. He is on YouTube. He's crushing social media with, his own show to his reviews. He was, I had actually sat down and met Jameson back at a JK Fun tour day. And ever since then, I've always thought he was a super rad dude. And I thought no one else that I want to have on this podcast too would be Mr. Jameson Redding, because he needs to come on and tell us all about the road trip and everything he's been up to. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Mr. Jameson Redding. Dude, what's going on?
What's up, man?
How are you?
Doing good. It's getting dark out here on the back porch, so hopefully you can see me all right.
No, we can. I can definitely see you, man. Dude, thanks for stopping on by the river run. As always, I appreciate all my guests that come on, take the time. So I gotta ask. You've been good, and at the same time, you've been working hard on some content and whatnot. But before we dive all the way into this, for the folks that may not know you, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, first of all. It's an honor to be here. I'm glad. River run fishing, obviously I'm a river angler, you know that, so
yeah.
fits my style perfectly. So, but appreciate you having me on. I don't know. I've been kayak fishing for probably around 12, 13 years, something like that. And trying to remember what year it was that I got my first kayak, but I can't remember now. 2008, maybe 2009, somewhere around in there. So maybe longer than that. But anyway, got into the sport for that, river fishing. A couple of buddies and I would wade, fish quite a bit in the New River here close to where I live in North Carolina. And we had tried canoeing and stuff, and we were trying to just find a way to access more water. And we all three bought kayaks on the same day. And just fell in love with it, fell in love with the sport, started traveling to some events, fished a tournament trail called the IFA Redfish Tour, which was actually at a kayak tour. So I fished that, got on the Jackson team, and then ended up working for Jackson Kayak for about 10 years, I think, from the time I started as a team member, doing some filming, video stuff, taking pictures, all the way up till when I left as brand manager of fishing. So that was an awesome ride. But that's kind of what led to the road trip angler. And that's kind of my history is, I traveled the country, was blessed to get to go to a lot of events, fish tournaments, meet tons of people, and, just really connect with the kayak fishing community. And I just always really enjoyed that aspect of it, the travel, and seeing how people fish for different species and just listening to their stories and learning, something from everybody that I got to spend time with, both on and off the water. And I think that's what led to the road trip angler, which we're in our, we just finished our third season's airing, and we're going to start filming the fourth season, hopefully here in the next month or so. So moving into the fourth season of that. And that's really what it's about is telling those stories and connecting with those anglers, as a road trip around the country, and, just kind of do what I've been doing, but now with a camera crew following.
Now, okay, so when you look at the idea of, as a kayak angler or just an angler, when you have to go and be an angler in front of the camera, there's probably a little bit more of a challenge to that, and there's a lot more work involved because now we're capturing it could be like, for instance, like you and your guests, out there on the water, or you might want to catch more of your guest, or maybe this is just an episode of Jameson. Is there a mindset that you kind of get yourself into for this when you get out on the water and you're actually like being filmed?
For sure. I think it's helped me again, like doing what I did at Jackson for so long and just working in the industry and creating content for brands. I always doing that realized that I can't just always be fishing. Like I sometimes have to put the rods down, pick up the camera, make sure we're capturing whatever story that we're trying to tell. And as the videographer and photographer, through most of that was the hard part. Brooks, Betty, and I traveled together for a very long time, and he was actually the team manager that got me on to the Jackson team back in the day, and we became really close. And he's like a brother to me. But we kind of had a system where, he was really good with the camera, I was really decent with the camera, so we would take turns fishing while the other one filmed. A lot of times, if he had partners or sponsors that he needed to gather content for, then I would, put the rod down and I would hold the camera until he caught a fish or a couple of fish, and we really captured a lot of content. And then we would just rotate, and he would pick the camera up and I would fish. And I remember there's days that, he would have a really amazing day and we would just like, okay, I'm going to film you, and vice versa. And so that was a really great way to kind of like condition yourself to, okay, like I need to make sure we capture this because it's awesome. It's kind of like that dilemma you talked about when you were opening about, do you kill the fish to get the state record? Do you release the fish? It's like you want to capture these moments, but you also want to be a part of that moment, and you have to kind of get in the mindset of like, but if we capture it, that's almost as good as if I was the one, fishing. If I caught a photo of him landing a fish that, was a giant or, some type of milestone in his fishing career, if I was able to capture that for him, then he's going to have that forever. That is just as much a part of that moment as him landing that fish. So I think, when we go out and we film for the TV show, it's that mindset. You have to keep like, we're doing this to show others how cool kayak fishing can be, how accessible it is, and to tell the stories of others. And so I think it's gotten to the point now where it's like, I want to fish, I want to catch fish, don't get me wrong, but also like I just really enjoying being out on the water and capturing those stories and being a part of it. And I think I've kind of relaxed, I guess, over the years, and that pressure for me to catch fish, maybe it's just in my head though, because when I go back and watch the episodes, it seems like I really want to catch fish. But I feel like that pressure, like I try to like make sure we're capturing the show first and foremost. And, but obviously you always want to catch fish too. So.
Well, in a TV show, that's probably, a good part to have. And you might have a lot of footage for, a 30-minute episode that you've spent 12, 15 hours on the water, and you're going to dial down into, a 30-minute episode.
It's usually 4 days. 4 days.
Okay, so there you go. Like,
yep.
It's a lot of content to get through.
Yep.
So I remember like when I first joined the Jackson team, for me it was, something I had always loved Jackson, their kayaks. And as a kayak angler, I always said if I was going to be on a team, I would want to be on the Jackson team. And I remember, joining the team, and then, we had the chance to actually spend the day together up in Frontenac Outfitters, and on your leg of your tour across the United States and into Canada. It was really cool to like sit down with you that day and just, talk, about kayak fishing, kayaks, everything to the, Carolina hurricanes to, the craziness and cell phone bills. But like, and for me, like when I joined, like I said, it was, all these anglers, like anglers I remember watching, like I remember watching your show, seeing it on TV, and I was like, wow, like this, it's just so like, just, he's the guy. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who probably do look up to everything you've done over the years, and your influence within the industry is a very strong, positive, you're easygoing, very likable person. And like your start in the industry to where you are now, you've probably personally, and on a personal development side of things, you've probably grown so much, and you've headed in your own direction now, because, at one point you were with Jackson, you stepped away from that, and you put more time into obviously focusing on the road trip angler. That there probably had to be a bit of a tough cookie to kind of like when you start to have to juggle things, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely was. And there were some other things, in my life outside of kayak fishing. My dad was retiring from a business he's ran for 43 years. And I wanted business? Fence business, correct. Yeah. It's a commercial. Started out when I was a kid. We did residential fence and also resurfaced tennis courts and basketball court surfaces. And it's kind of migrated into a commercial only fence business. So like big industrial type commercial fencing, lots of gates and gate operators. But anyway, he's done that for, like I said, over 40 years, and kind of like, okay, what, am I getting rid of this? Like what's going to happen? Because my sisters are both doing their own thing. And I worked in the company growing up and after college for a little bit. So anyway, that was happening at the same time. And I knew that I couldn't be on the road for both the Road Trip Angler and for Jackson Kayak as much as I needed to be, and do that with two kids that are, in young and in school. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so it was just something had to give. And, I think the show was starting to really gain legs. We wanted to focus on growing YouTube. We actually, the first season of the show, we didn't have any YouTube presence. And then the second season, we just put the first season on YouTube. We didn't do anything else. So it was kind of time to like, okay, let's focus on, building out the YouTube side of things. And so, yeah, it just all kind of fell into place, but it was definitely it was a hard decision. I mean, there were some tears shed, both from me and others that I've just had their family, and the Jackson team has always felt like family. And when I got on the team, I was kind of the same as you. Like my first kayak was not a Jackson, but my second kayak was, and I needed a river fishing kayak. I had bought a Wilderness Commander 120, which is an open cockpit boat they don't make anymore.
It's so sweet.
I loved it, but it wasn't the boat for going through whitewater. And I'm not talking about, I wasn't running class 3 whitewater, but even a class 2 or even a 1 that has, a little wave train, water comes over the top of an open cockpit boat like that. Yeah. Boat starts to go down and starts to become a problem. So I'm just like trying to figure out, what is the best kayak for river fishing. And I saw that this whitewater brand was actually designing a kayak with Drew Gregory to be a river fishing kayak. And I didn't know anything about Jackson at the time, other than they were a leader in whitewater. And so it made sense to me. I mean, like if they can run and do all this hardcore whitewater, they can definitely make a kayak to handle the river that I'm fishing. And so I bought the Coosa, really liked it, got a CUDA when it came out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I remember I was fishing an IFA national championship in Louisiana. And I had a Hobie Pro Angler that I had borrowed, and I had my CUDA, which then they didn't have a CUDA 14. It was just the CUDA. And but it was a 14-foot boat. And I decided that morning, I'm like, I really just want to paddle. I don't want to be in the big Hobie boat. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I was just really comfortable in my CUDA. I liked it. And I ended up taking fourth in that tournament. And it was kind of my first, like, it wasn't a win, but it was a win for me to be able to qualify to be at a national tournament and then be on the stage. And they had camera crews there, and, they were filming for television and stuff. So, and that might've been actually the first time I ever like was on, like for a brief second, I was on that episode, on television. And so it was just like kind of that all came together, and that's what led me to being on the Jackson team. But it gave me that taste of like, man, I really want to do this for a living. I want to, and I didn't know at the time if it was tournaments or what it would be, but it just led me down that road. And 10 years at a company that is that close knit and is a family, and the team is a family, that's a hard decision to step away, from everybody and everything.
That definitely, I worked at a place for 12 years, and then I had to make this decision. Do I continue here, or do I take a chance at somewhere new? And I ended up taking a chance at somewhere new, and I moved forward with that. And it was great, but I'll never forget, the 12 years at the other place and all the memories that I have of that and the people I met along the way.
Yeah.
And, I think it's cool, like I think it's really cool what you're doing. Like you're going out there and you're creating content on a show that's just so focused towards kayak anglers. You know what I mean? You're going across the country. You're not just showcasing like one species. Like you're showcasing, your passion for redfish, and then you're calling up somebody to come fish, whether it's, Dustin Nichols, or, you got another buddy, I could go, or you're sitting in there with Jeff Little, but you're teaching at the same time. And part where you're teaching, I think that's important, because as a viewer and a listener, it's great to see fishing videos and whatnot, but the interaction to how you did it, how you caught it, how you prepared, I think that is just such wealthy information to have.
Well, there's so much to a trip, right? I mean, the thing that spoke to me the most about kayak fishing after getting, realizing like it was a great way to get on the water to access the rivers around the house. The thing that spoke to me was I could put this in my truck. I can put it on top. I had a Subaru Outback for many years, and I would put 2 kayaks on top of it and literally go anywhere and really fish for any species. And back when I first, again, got into it, and this may have even been before I had bought the kayak, Jim Salmons, who was a Jackson team member, had the show, which was the Kayak Fishing Show. I mean, that was the name of it. And so I would DVR that. We had DVRs back then, and my buddies would come over and we'd watch it. And I think what I loved about that show was that travel aspect. Now, he was doing a lot of out of the country and a lot of big game fishing, catching tuna and marlin, but it really just, at the time, I had I was like, there's no way I could ever go offshore and, catch rooster fish or yellowfin tuna. But it showed me that, hey, these kayaks can go anywhere. They can really do anything. Like I can go fishing for redfish one day and then drive 8 hours and smallmouth fish, the next day. And so I think that led me to, the travel. And that's why I started fishing the IFA Redfish Tour, because there was no KBF. There was actually no bass tour at the time for kayak anglers. And there were tournaments, but they were like, local tournaments.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to fish something that forced me to travel to new destinations so that I could try to learn and figure out those fisheries and meet people, and you build a plan. And I think that's kind of what we try to showcase on the show now, is that aspect of, if you have a kayak, the door is open. You can go do so many things.
Yeah.
And the community is so like welcoming. And I don't know if, I've never been in a bass boat community per se. I've got a boat, but it's not, I'm not a bass angler in that sense. And I don't know if it's as open as this, but the kayak fishing community has always been really open, really, willing to share a lot of knowledge and take you fishing. And so having that open mind of, if someone comes fishing with me, I want to share some stuff, but also, when you go out, don't be afraid to ask people, And I think showcasing that on the show, that a lot of the places we go, I have either never fished or it's been a long time since I fished.
Yeah.
We fish for species that might be my first time, fishing, and then you go, and after a couple of days, and that's one reason that, it takes so long to film it, is like it takes a couple of days usually to figure out a pattern or learn that fishery. But, we end up catching fish and having a good time and coming back from that trip with a ton of memories and a ton of experience and new friends. And I think that just trying to share that element and maybe inspire other people to like just step outside of their comfort zone of whether it's, a certain species or a certain, they're a lake fisherman and they don't want to get on a river, or they're saltwater, they don't want to go freshwater, or vice versa. I think that's always been really cool. I'll share a quick story just kind of that, like seeing that in person, not just from behind the camera or watching it on TV, but we went to as JK shoot when we were launching. I think it was the redesigned FD. It wasn't the NAR, but we went to Panama, and we kind of extended it out to a few team members that had just been crushing it. We wanted to give them that opportunity, and Chris Funk was one of them that went, and Russell Johnson, and they had never, both of them, there were others there too, but they had never fished like in saltwater. Like Chris had done inshore saltwater, but neither one had ever like launched and went through the breakers and been offshore. And I don't even know if Russell had saltwater fish from a kayak, but also Chris had never, he had to get his passport to just even leave the country, right? Like Russell had been in the Navy, so he had been out of the country, but Chris had never like been out of the country. I mean, the whole experience for him was just like exciting, scary. He was nervous.
Yeah.
He didn't know if he could eat and what he couldn't eat. And it's like, dude, it's fine. Calm down. Like you're gonna be like great. But he was nervous about it, and getting to see like all that and almost reminisce about like my first time, going on an adventure like that, and realizing that, trying to inspire people to step outside of their comfort zone and do something like that, that's a trip of a lifetime. And you can get almost like used to it if you do it a lot, and then you have to step back. And I think for me on that trip, I actually was able to step back and go, this is awesome. You need to always remember how awesome this is. And try to share that with others,
So grateful for the moment, to be involved and to be in it. It's funny that you mentioned about that story, because I believe Chris Funk actually went and wrote an article in the Kayak Angler magazine about his experience.
I think he did.
He did, and he talks about being this guy from Alabama that had never left, and that just the idea that you're going to a whole new place where it's going to be so much more different from where what you call home. It's a whole new culture. A whole new body of water that you've maybe never fished, like you said. So another thing you brought up, this is just a funny, quick story, that I had Drew Gregory on the show. And when I had Drew on, he actually spoke about his time with Jackson and when he went into the design of the Kusa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that, once again, we're always inspiring others, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just that right there that you, several episodes later, that you bring up the fact that, Jackson had found this as a whitewater company is moving into the kayak fishing, and the Kusa is the boat that you end up, getting into, and is your boat that is later designed probably by somebody that you probably sat along with,
it was the Kusa X, and even some of the aspects of the Kusa HD. But I don't think I ever really thought, I'm sitting here fishing out of this Kusa, never thought that I would either, I traveled with Drew for years, and filmed and took pictures, and me and Brooks, and then later to be like part of the design team that brought, the third gen Kusa, to market. You think about it, like it's almost like kind of unreal a little bit. Like, I know it sounds
100%,
kind of
man.
cliche, but it's just like, okay, I watched, and the same thing I could say about Jim. I was watching his show, right? And my buddies and I would watch it. And then I got on the team. Then I was traveling with Drew, and then Jim got on the team. I'm like, oh, that's a big deal. Like, I watched Jim's show. And I remember we actually went to, I went with Drew out to the West Coast, and we were just doing some kind of like fun tour stuff, but this is pretty fun tour, but we were visiting some dealers, meeting up with the rep for Jackson and going to some events, fishing events, and just, trying to like get some content on the West Coast. And, Drew was going to be a guest host on Jim's show. So we were going to actually meet at his house. And I remember like sitting in the driveway and just like, I can't believe that I'm getting ready to like walk in, I'm already hanging out with Drew, which again, like I didn't know him before I started looking for river fishing stuff, but then that's kind of how I discovered Drew. But I was watching Jim's show, like was kind of the first thing that I was like focused on with kayak fishing was Jim's show. So to me, I was just like, I can't believe this. And then we went on to be like really close friends, and we're still really close friends, one of my best friends. And he's inspired me and taught me so much. But also just like, you almost forget about those moments sometimes, because you're hanging out with him, you're talking, you're fishing. I got to be on his show several times. I got to film his show a couple times, and to just like look back and go, the same production company that was producing his show that I was inspired by, I'm now, my show is being produced by that company. And then also, Drew and the Coosa, that same boat that led me to Jackson, I actually helped like work on, a future generation of that boat. And so those are like the pinch me moments. Like, it's like, well, that's pretty cool. It's like,
oh, I'll be honest with you, dude. Even when I got on the JK team, and I'm still a newbie, but I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would ever like get a chance to like hang out for the day at Frontenac Outfitters with Jameson Redding. You know what I mean? Like I'll be honest, I remember, like I said, I always would see your show up. I'd see you post in the team group, and I'd see your show on TV because like your show is all over the place. But and like I said, you were inspired, and you're still inspiring others like me. So I think that's pretty cool if you want to talk, nailing it down. Like, and it's cool too that we get to sit here and chat about everything that's going on. I want to say when you talk about the early days, that would have been like what, like Hooked on Wild Waters, I think it was.
So it was kind of before. So I think Drew had filmed a pilot or an intro, and was trying to get the Hooked on Wild Waters show going. And then he was also doing the River Bassin Tournament Trail, and he had done that before, and then I think it had kind of went away for a little while or a year or two. And then I know Brooks and I worked with him, and we kind of came back out with it and did, I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years of the River Bassin Trail. And then we also started trying to bring back his Hooked on Wild Waters. And so the first year that he kind of brought that back to YouTube, I helped film a lot of that, and I think it was on one episode. Brooks was on one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was about that time. And then I kind of started doing some other things at Jackson, and, we just kind of did our own thing after that. And me and Brooks actually launched the JK Media House, what we call JK Media House, with James, the marketing director that was before Emily. And the whole goal with that even was to, try to get a bunch of team members together in one place. And instead of Jackson was never about like hiring a model, right, to be the face of a kayak or whatever. It was like, who is the user of this product? And we have them on the team. We have a great team. Let's just take the camera to those people, bring the new boat or whatever, and go on an adventure and try to come back with a lot of content, promo, walkthrough, destination style pieces, and just tell their stories and And that was a lot of fun because, we had to work, we had to capture that content, but it was a really great way to get to know the team a lot better and just spend several days. And you know how it is, when you fish a tournament, you're focused on being competitive. But when you go to a fishing event that's, you're just camping or you're hanging out at Frontenac, I'm saying that wrong, Frontenac, like we did that day, you really get to know people a lot better. And
100%, man.
So.
No, it's true though. Like and that is also one of the really positives to being the road trip angler is that, not just in the show, not just on the show, but outside of the show where you do go for, promotional style work where, you may be talking about a kayak or, going to certain iCasts or whatnot, the fishing shows across. Because like at the same time, the road trip angler holds it's airing in the US. And I think it's also airing now on Wild TV, is it not?
It is Wild TV. They've been sharing the last week. It's been really cool to see. They've been taking some of the content, making reels and sharing some photos.
Yeah, I was like, man, Wild TV, because that's like a very Canadian channel for all outdoors things up here. But in the US, you're on to 90 plus million households are viewing the road trip angler.
They have, and that's a funny one, because it's like 90 something million households have Bally sports networks.
Yeah.
And I'm on the national feed for Bally, but our viewership, I think, over the last 3 seasons has been like 12, 13 million as a conservative number.
Yeah.
But it's it's pretty cool to be on their national feed for sure. Like, I get text messages or messages on Facebook from people that I haven't talked to in years or random people that are at a airport sports bar and the show will be airing in Michigan at the airport sports bar. You know what I mean? And so it's just, that's really cool to cause I don't know where it's airing and what time in every location.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to, kind of reconnect with some old friends that are like, holy crap. Like I was at a Texas Roadhouse and you're just like on in the background, like at the bar.
Well, I remember sitting down having dinner one night and I was watching the Blue Jays play.
I think you messaged me that.
Yeah. And I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, I get up from the dinner table. My wife's like, where are you going? I'm like, I got to go to the TV for a second. And I'm like, oh, there he is, the road trip angler. And I was like, no way. It's on Bally Sports and it's also on PBS.
Yeah. So that's new for us this year. The PBS is another one that, like Bally, has regional networks and they are nationwide. Obviously PBS is nationwide, but each region has its own PBS network that can air its own content, or they can air stuff that's on the national feed. And so you actually have to have one of the regional networks champion your show in order to have access to the national feed. And once they do that, then the national feed can pick it up, and all the regional networks have they can choose to air it or not to air it. And so Watertown PBS, which is in New York, is basically our champion. Like they're championing. I can't speak. They are promoting the road trip angler on that local network, and we've been approved for the national feed. So we're really looking forward to actually doing that as well, because that's a huge network and everyone has access to it. It's a free network, and it has to be edited a little bit different because PBS is very much about not being an ad or a paid for type thing because it's public broadcasting. So we want to move away from the logos everywhere like NASCAR and the in your face like sponsorship type stuff, but still share the adventures that we go on. So it'll be interesting to see that as it unfolds.
Well, that's honestly, congratulations on that. To me, that's really cool. You're really bringing it to the national level, like you're saying. So I do have to ask you, do you fish crankbaits at all?
I do. I was listening earlier. I have not fished any live target baits, to be honest. I usually fish a lot of Spro crankbaits when I do fish crankbaits. And that is probably like I'm trying to think right now, actually, in my box, if I have anything other than a Spro, and I can't think of any, to be honest.
So this one here is like your classic rattle trap. I love fishing crankbaits. I love fishing chatterbaits. As a river angler, to me, you can really search a lot of water quickly with making a lot of noise, and a chatterbait definitely is one of my favorites. The crankbait is probably going to fall into second. I've gotten over the last year, I've gotten more into throwing, like just ripping these rattle trap baits. But the reason I wanted to ask you about this is because you generally have on most of your social media, you talk about Batson Enterprises, you talk about rain shadow rods, and I personally had never heard of them until really yourself. I think even like Jeff Little too. He had mentioned about it, but I wanted to pick your brain about because for instance, when you go to like a Bass Pro, or you go to, like a Gander Outdoors, or, in Canada, you get Cabela's, whatever, you go into the store, and if you're looking for a certain rod, whether it's, a moderate, a extra heavy, if you're looking for a light action rod, it's laid out for you.
Yep.
The difference about Batson Enterprises into the rain shadow rods is that this is a custom rod. So these, and you predominantly fish, I would say, are they all rain shadow blanks?
Yeah, they are. So yeah, I did dive into that a bit, and even kind of maybe give a background on why a lot of people probably haven't heard of Batson to start with. And I hadn't. I was someone that hadn't heard of them until I met them at a custom rod builders expo.
Oh, cool.
And in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But they are think of them as like the nuts and bolts of the fishing industry. They do not make a built rod. They make the components to build a rod. So they make blanks. The rain shadow line up is their blank line. They make reel seats, guides, hook keepers, handles, grips, pretty much everything you would need to put a rod together. And they sell both to rod builders, but also they sell to other rod companies. So there are a lot of in fact, almost every rod company in the country buys something from them, whether it's a hook keeper, a guide, a set of guides, a reel seat, a grip, or even the blanks. And some companies, a lot of companies will build their own blanks, but maybe they don't have guides or whatever. And so they just have a huge catalog, and I mean huge. The thing is like this thick paperback catalog. And it's just full of every component, right down to the color, to the texture, if you want cork, carbon fiber, whatever, EVA, and blanks. And it can kind of be overwhelming, but even like you mentioned, going into Bass Pro, and you're looking through the rods, and they've got 8 different brands, and within each of those brands, there's 10 different fast action, medium heavy rods. And you're like, I don't understand. Like, how do I dial this down?
Yeah.
And so where it comes into play, number one, if you're buying an off the shelf rod, it's really open to interpretation for that rod brand, what their medium heavy fast action is compared to another rod that's medium heavy fast. And this really comes into play when you're talking about moderates and moderate fast, and that kind of thing. And so it's not as simple as just like you said, like, I want a medium. I know I like this rod. It's a medium heavy fast, And then you're like, well, I can't find that brand, so I'm just going to grab another reputable brand and to get their medium heavy fast. And you're like, well, that doesn't fish anything like this one over here does. And so, and also then it's, where does the reel seat need to be? Do you like a shorter rod butt or a longer rod butt? Do you like a split grip? What are your likes and dislikes? And so you then have to kind of take all that into consideration. The custom rod building thing takes really all that work out of it for you, and you can really dial in. I really like this blank. I like how it performs, but I don't want it in a spinning rod. I want it in a casting rod, and I don't like a foregrip on my rod, and I like a split grip, and I want cork handles and not EVA handles, or I want the rubbery kind of like tennis grip style handle. And you can dial all that in. And so now you're getting the blank you want with the grip that you want and the rod length or rod butt length that you want. And, it really is, and I hate to say it because I know it's overused, but it really is a game changer for you. And Jeff Little, I was very little that I get to introduce Jeff Little to, because Jeff Little's been in the game for so long. Yeah. And typically he's been there, done that. And he was with St. Croix forever, and they make great rods. And,
yes, they do.
And he was actually getting their blanks and building. And so he was no longer with them. People change jobs, change positions, and this whole pro staff thing, like things come and go. And he was at a point where he was still using their product, but not affiliated. And he went on a trip with me out west, and I had told him, like, you really got to try this. You really got to try this. And so he made the commitment to build a couple of rods using the blanks that I suggested and the ones that when we were at Rain Shadow out in Washington State, they kind of went through what he was wanting to do with the rods, and he was able to put some together and just fell in love with their blanks, specifically the Judge. I know me and you talked about this in the kind of pre-show, and also the Eternity, which are their two higher end blanks. But it just makes such a difference when you can feel what your bait is doing. You mentioned crankbaits and chatterbaits. I love moving baits, especially in a river. I throw a chatterbait a lot. And there are a lot of blanks out there that are technique specific now. That's kind of a marketing thing that companies are doing. Like, here's our chatterbait rod and here's our spinnerbait rod. But again, that's their opinion of what they think a chatterbait rod should be. And I found that when I would throw what was typically a chatterbait, I was losing fish. I'm throwing a heavy half-ounce chatterbait in fast-moving current with a big 5-inch trailer on it, right? That's how I smallmouth fish. And these fish were jumping and shaking that heavy bait, and I was losing them. So, and that was with a fast-action rod. So I started throwing a crankbait blank, which was the Judge, which is more of a moderate fast, and also it has a little bit of glass that transitions to the tip. So you got a fiberglass tip, and you have a graphite in the rod butt section. So you've got the backbone, but you've got that more sensitive tip that has a little bit of give to it. So when they come up and do those big head shakes, you're not ripping that bait away from them.
No.
And immediately just was landing more fish, didn't sacrifice sensitivity, and could feel when I had a blade of grass on my chatterbait and it wasn't chattering like it should be, and it just made all the difference. And yeah, they're a little bit more, but that really depends. And I think people get maybe intimidated by the custom rod thing, but you can get a custom rod for a couple $100 or less. And, most rods now, for a decent rod, you're in 200 plus range.
I remember it's funny because you're sharing it, this whole idea about fast action rods and you're getting shook off and whatnot. 2 years ago, I ended up purchasing a St. Croix Legend Tournament sweeper spinnerbait rod, and I had seen this rod in a Jeff Little video. And I was just like, it was like his go-to chatterbait, spinnerbait rod, like moving bait rod. And I was like, man, like this thing's sweet. Like, but I couldn't find it. Every time I looked it up, and then I started going through, and I was like, anyways, this became my chatterbait rod, and I do, like I said, they're fantastic rods, and your landing ratio is so much greater than that of a fast action rod. A moderate fast to moderate action rod, it just fish stay hint.
And it could be, it could be the kayak thing. I throw braid 100% of the time, and I actually just filmed a video that'll be releasing probably this week on why I think kayak anglers should fish braid. But it could be a combination of those things that mean you need to get a moderate rod versus someone throwing monofilament might get away with a fast action rod.
Because it has more stretch.
It has more stretch, know, but I just know for me, my hookup or my landing, like I would hook the fish, but landing the fish went way up. And, he was talking about the same thing with a different technique when he went from one of their blanks called the Revelation over to the Eternity. The Eternity is their higher modulus graphite blank, both fast action, but the Eternity is much lighter and much more sensitive. And he was missing the bites, and then he wasn't missing the bites. And so, there are little changes that you can make. And I think another thing that's really cool about the custom rod thing, you mentioned earlier with my show and just how I fished for the last decade. I've been I'll fish for anything, anywhere, right? So I'm not. I love smallmouth. I love redfish. Those are my two go-tos. But even that, you can take the same basic rod setups. And when I talk about basic rod setups, I'm fishing a 7 to 7'4" in that range, usually medium heavy, moderate to fast action, somewhere in that realm. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to fish casting rods or casting reels going to have 30-pound test braid on it. My spinning reels have 20-pound test braid. I can take that setup and I can catch 95% of what you've seen me fish for on the show, maybe even almost 100%. The only thing that I would not want to do is go big game fishing, offshore. But even the big striper, that's what I caught when me and Jeff were in Maryland this season. Chasing pretty significantly giant, like just big striper. I was fishing with the same rod I take smallmouth fishing on the river, and being able to build a rod with guides that can hold up to salt water with stronger reel seats. I go carbon fiber grips. I know they're going to take a beating, and I'm not worried about, wearing out like cork. I'm not worried about fish slime getting slippery on EVA. So I'm built these rods to be that like very versatile. Like I'm going to throw 7 to 8 rods in my truck. I can drive literally me and Jeff went around the entire country. We started at my house in North Carolina. We drove all the way to Washington State. We fished all the way down to San Diego and drove all the way back to my house. And then the next week after that, I came to see you in Canada. And that entire trip, I was able to use those same 7 to 8 rods to catch everything from lingcod up in Washington State, to smallmouth bass in Oregon, to just whatever. And I think that is why I love it so much, because I don't know if I could go buy 7 or 8 rods from any other rod brand just off the shelf that would be that versatile for me without, me sitting down and really dialing in rods that fit the way I fish.
Well, and you've brought up a really good point, is that you have dialed down the amount of rods that you're traveling. Why? Because when you're on the road, extra gear is, an extra thing you got to worry about.
Right.
As a kayak angler, you could go out there with, as many rods as you want. Yak Attack has made the Blackpack Pro, which is given us, an endless ability of rigging as many rods as we can to it.
It's almost a problem because you have that space.
It's so
like,
true.
I got to fill it up. I gotta put something in every spot. But
when you have a custom rod, or you have custom rods, that are able to do multiple, techniques And the beauty of braid is leaders, and 30-pound braid can usually tie up pretty well to most common leader sizes, and that right there is less gear, instead of running, let's say, floral for this and mono for that, and braided line here, and then like you got leader material, you got extra line you're bringing with you, multiple rods, and at the end of the day, are you truly effectively fishing with that much gear behind you? Some would say yes. Some would say, I don't know.
I think it's a difference too in a tournament situation. Like, I know tournament anglers that take tons of rods, right?
True.
Most of the time, and they'll tell you that they use 3 or 4 of the 12 rods they take on the water. But I understand the mindset of, I don't know what I'm going to need, and I'm competing for a large chunk of money. And I'm also spending money in order to compete for that large chunk of money.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to be prepared for what, and I get that.
100%.
And I don't have that, even though we're trying to make a show, I'm okay if at the end of the day I have to say, well, we didn't catch anything today, because, that's the realistic thing when you're traveling, is like, you might not hit it right, or you might not, you might just not get the bite. And luckily, knock on wood, I don't think we've actually filmed an episode where we didn't catch fish. So someone's been able to figure it out most of the time. So, but yeah, I think that's just my style, and I think to each their own. I think I'm not telling other people that they should or shouldn't do that. I just think that for me, what I love about kayak fishing is that versatility, is the fact that I can drop in on the side of the road, drag through the woods, and access the body of water. And I love that it can be as simple as you want it to be, or it can be as complicated and crazy as you want it to be. And, everything in between. But again, for me, it's just that versatility of, okay, I know that I can take these 3 or 4 casting rods, these 2 spinning rods, and pretty much fish for just about anything that I want to fish for.
Well, and like I said, custom rods built to your spec, your wants and needs in a rod, because and I've never personally have owned a custom rod, nor have I ever had a rod built. So I don't have a lot of experience on this topic, but the way that I've seen it is that here is the blank that you like. These are the guides and the guide spacing you like, built with the grip, the real seats. It's like the ultimate rod. Now, will you maybe pay a bit more? I don't know. Will you, like you said, you can usually do it for a couple $100, but at the end of the day, you're walking away, like I said, you may not necessarily needed those other 3 rods, because now you got 1 rod that does like 4 or 5 techniques.
Yeah.
I like the braid when I'm running casting. I'm all over the place, but if I'm going to do braid, it's, I usually like to sit with 30-pound, and then for spinning, I'm all over the place. But yeah, like the beauty of braid, and you can just switch out leaders is awesome. You know what I mean?
I talk about, and I'm giving away my videos.
Yeah, we don't want to give away too much here.
That's fine, because I hope that maybe it'll dive in a little deeper, and maybe somebody will watch that from this show here. And
I hope so.
But my whole thing with braid is that, and I basically in that video I give my top 5 reasons of why I think kayak anglers should fish with braid. But I think the 2 main ones, number 1, it doesn't stretch, right? So when you're in a kayak, and I don't care how, and this, I don't care how small the fish is. When you go to set the hook on that fish, unless you're anchored, you're going to pull your boat towards that fish.
Yeah.
And create slack in that line. It's going to happen. because a small 1 pound bass will pull a kayak around. They'll move a kayak. They just will, even the big heavy ones. And this goes for light. Like I've been doing a lot of inflatable content, out of small skiffs but these things weigh the same as a kayak, and fish can move the boat. So if you're fishing monofilament or fluorocarbon and it's got give and stretch in it, and you're fishing in a kayak, when you go to set the hook, that line is stretching and the boat is pulling towards the fish. So you're giving too much slack in my mind to that fish, and you're not going to get as good of hook penetration as if when you jar down, that braid has no stretch. You immediately connect with that fish. Now the kayak's moving because it's not preloading with the stretch and bouncing back. And I just feel like you're going to get a better hook set, especially when you're fishing finesse. And I know a lot of people, like you mentioned with leaders, a lot of people are afraid to fish braid. With finesse, like, hey, I'm super clear water. I want to fish 3, 4, 5 pound, monofilament. I'm like, fine, put 12, 15 pound braid on, same diameter, then tie your leader on, go 8, 9 feet, however long you want. But you're still taking a lot less line that's going to have that stretch in it. Even if you put 10 feet of leader on and that leader has some stretch, it's not the same as having your entire cast laid out there with stretch in it. And so that's just been my opinion. And I know people, I've argued with people about knots, like, well, I don't want to have another knot in my line, but
the failure point, because
it's just not, I don't have that. It's like maybe you can back me up on this, but my knots are not where my stuff fails. It fails somewhere in the braid where I've got a nick, or somewhere in the fluorocarbon where I've got a nick. Maybe one in every, 200 knots have actually came undone. But if you find a knot that you have confidence in and you practice it and you tie that knot, knots are proven to have 100% plus breaking strength at this point, so.
Well, you bring up a good point. When you look at for fluorocarbon, this is just one here. So you're just going to tie right to the hook, the lure, whatnot. You'll probably spend more time watching that fluorocarbon, feeling it, because you want to know where those little nicks are. If you backlash it in the spool and you nick it, it's like you might as well start pulling it out and take that chunk out, because there's a good chance when you go to set that hook, you've created a weak spot in it. Monofilament would probably fall into the same with a little bit more stretch and forgiveness. But I find the one thing with braid is you don't really run the risk of actually nicking it the way that you would with other lines. Like there is more forgiveness, because it's harder to actually really nick that line braid, unless you're, maybe you've caught, for instance, like you've caught a good
hook caught in it,
hook caught in it, or like a chatterbait, you got a big hook on the back of that, and you've wrapped it up, or even if you throw in let's say a whopper plopper, and you're chucking it out there, and sometimes you're throwing it and then it does a weird little loop, and
and you can even run leaders on those. I mean, a lot of times I'll run a 20 to 30 pound leader, just a short piece on my topwater baits, and I know a lot of people don't do that, but when you do that, it stiffens up that last little section, and you won't have that issue as much with that. Or if it does, it'll be on leader and it won't be on your line. So there's little tricks, but even with braid, so mentioning what you just said, you get a nick on it. So let's say I do fray something and I can see it and I know it's going to eventually break there, where it wrapped around my guide and frayed or something. I have many, many times cut and did a uni knot with the braid and tied it back together and just reeled it right back up and just keep going. And I remember one time I changed out some line on a rod that had been on there for way too long, like 2 years plus 3 years, something like that. And I think I had tied it back together 5 times. And I was still confidently fishing with that braided line. And there's no way I could have done that with monofilament or fluorocarbon. No. The other reason, and I was kind of getting to that earlier, I said 2 reasons, and you can get all 5 of them if you check out the video later this week.
All right.
But I think the other big one is sensitivity. You are, especially if you're doing what we're talking about, and you're spending the money to go get a nice rod or a custom rod because you want it to be lighter and you want it to be more sensitive. But then you put monofilament on. You're right off the bat, you're taking some of that sensitivity out of what that blank can do, because it has memory, because it has stretch. It's going to just not transfer that bite or even the bottom. A lot of times it's not feeling the bite. Like I know you're like this probably with your crankbaits and your chatterbaits. You want to feel what you're coming in contact with.
100%.
You can tell a difference in wood and in a rock. You can tell a difference in gravel bottom or boulders. And sometimes with a chatterbait, you might think, oh, is this fouled up and not chattering, or is a fish just kind of holding it in its mouth and swimming with it? And you can feel those little things when you have a good rod and you have it paired up with braid. You're going to feel that stuff that you so much more, to the point when you first, like, you go buy a really nice rod that's really light and really sensitive, and you're fishing braid, you're going to set the hook on everything the first time you go out, like, because you're going to feel so much more than you're used to feeling. And now every time that you bump a rock, you're gonna be jarring down on it.
Well, and the one thing is, when you fish like crankbaits and chatterbaits, like, the idea is, you kind of want to put it in the things that's where the fish are hiding. Those spots that, like, there might be a chance of getting it hung up, but you know what I mean? Like, those are the spots. And what better than to have an actual rod that can have that sensitivity to feeling it, but at the same time, like, braid just giving you that sensitivity in the line. Because, like, I've had people look at, like, chatterbaits that I have, and they're like, yeah, maybe it's time to get some new chatterbaits, eh? And I'm like, no, like, they're all chipped, to all hell, and
no paint left on them at all.
No paint left on it.
Blades like worn off on the corners.
Yeah. Some with Z-Man trailers that I just have never taken off, you know what I mean? Or crankbaits with bills that are just, cracked, chipped, but at the end of the day, like, I just find those are the spots that are going to get them. You gotta make it dig,
Yeah.
And that's the other part too. It's like that no stretch in that line with that braid is truly, like you said, when you're in a kayak and you're being towed around by a fish, like, the moment you give him that slack line, and fish are getting smart, man, especially smallmouth. Like, they know how to get out. They can shake things pretty quick. But with kayak fishing, the excitement that comes with, being that close to the water and hooking a fish, like, why not try and hold on to that memory as instead of letting him go with maybe, a poor line choice for that. But no, I will say this. I look forward to seeing that video. So if you are watching right now, that video is going to drop. So when, what do you think? Like, in the next week or so?
Yeah, I likely maybe Sunday. We try to usually drop on Sunday or Monday.
Cool.
And I missed this week, actually. We had just such bad weather. I'm behind on content. And so we're editing that one right now. And so hopefully we'll have it ready for this weekend. But yeah, I mean, it's simple, but it's just, my opinion on it. And
okay,
so I think so.
We covered rods. And, like, for braided line, I'm just gonna randomly guess here. You're a Seagar guy, because I can tell by
yeah.
Smackdown braid is the braid that you like to use.
Yeah, I use mostly, honestly, my dog is trying to scratch a bug up out of the porch or something here.
Oh, that's all right.
Mostly I use their high vis, which is another thing that I don't think I ever really thought about doing when I first started throwing braid. I wanted the camos, I wanted the dark greens, But again, I've gotten very used to throwing leaders on just about everything, even if it's a short leader. So it's just easy for me to run 2 foot of leader and throw that high vis. And I'll give you an example. If I'm Cinco fishing and I'm wacky rigging and I'm just really slow going, I'll put 6-7 feet of fluorocarbon leader on. But then that high vis line, sometimes that bite is so subtle. It's literally just the fish, putting it in its mouth and hanging out in that same area or, moving. And I'll watch that line kind of pop, just like, you'll see it jump just a little bit. You won't even feel it in the rod.
Yeah.
Or you'll see it, move in a different direction. And it helps me, especially if I do a lot of, we're drifting the river, right? And I'm throwing the Cinco kind of out parallel to the bank. And almost like you would fly fish, I'm just letting it drift along with me. And, when you're doing that, being able to watch that line is really key. So I actually throw the high vis probably more than I do the gray or the camo colors.
Would you is that just for spinning, or are we talking like for
across the board? Yeah, across the board. I go different. Like my spinning setups are all like 2000s. I used to have like 4000s, right? And then now again, kayak, right? And so I'll run 20-pound braid on a 2000 or 2500 class spinning rod or spinning reel, and 30-pound on the majority of my bait casters. I do have like a couple that I run 60 on. If I'm throwing just bigger baits, heavier baits and whatnot, but mostly that's it. It's 30-pound and 20-pound, and that's what I go through the most.
There's a little secret. The road trip angler is giving away all the braid sizes to. He's made a lot of great points. Dude, I gotta say, like you. When you bring up the concept of why braid, I'm actually excited to see this video. So I look forward to seeing that. But so we covered rods, custom rods, and we've dived into, we got into this whole braid and fishing line part. But you have the rod, you have the braid, but you need a reel. And this is the next part I thought was really interesting about Batson Enterprises, is that like they do carry rain shadow rods, but Batson Enterprises also handles Batson reels, correct?
No, they don't have it. They do not have a reel.
Okay, so they don't have the reel.
Just the real seat. So like the real seat on the rods, but no.
Okay,
no
so now with that is I thought that was actually the other way, but your reels, you generally use which reel?
So that's another one. Sorry. Yeah, for me, I've been all over the place. But again, it kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier with my personal setups and my rods. I've tried to be very versatile, and mostly what I mean there is I need a rod that can go fish for saltwater species and a rod that can go fish for freshwater species. So it does limit me a little bit in that sense. Like I can't just go pick up a freshwater reel, because either I'm going to have to buy 2 of them and buy a saltwater reel and then buy a freshwater reel. And I might be spending a little bit less money on each reel, but not getting, the versatility. And then I have to have a dedicated rod, or I got to switch reels every time. And so what I've done is I've just decided, okay, I'm taking 8-9 rods. I'm going to buy high-end reels that are rated to go saltwater fishing. And sometimes when rod or reel manufacturers say they're rated for saltwater, they don't really mean kayak fishing saltwater. They mean like you're on a boat, you're off the water, you're not down in the grind, getting splashed every 5 seconds.
No.
So over the years, the cost of my reels has went up because I have this like graveyard of reels in my building that I'm like, all right, well, that one is not going to hold up. I found that I'll share who I'm using now and who I really want to replace everything with. But before that, I'll talk about what I've used for like the past like 3 seasons. most of my reels are Shimano's. I really like their Chronarch and the Corrado. They have a Corrado K, I think it is, that is a saltwater rated reel. That's a pretty good price point. But I moved up to the Chronarchs, and you have to get the one that is rated for saltwater if you're going to do what I'm doing. But they also have the Chronarch, like I think it's the MGL, which is a magnesium spool, which you cannot take in saltwater. I have the ones that do not have the magnesium spool.
Yeah,
they've held, I think it's the Chronarch G.
Yeah,
I think it's the G. And it's held up really well. I do have a couple of those that need to go to the repair shop because again, they're just, we're rough on our gear. We're kayak anglers. We're down in it. We're getting splashed constantly and whatnot, and in and out of a truck. We don't have rod lockers that we can store everything on the boat.
No.
But I picked up a reel from a company called Bates, Bates.
Yes.
And so where you might be thinking Bates and Rain Shadow have almost kind of, they haven't partnered by any means, but the people at Rain Shadow, the Batsons themselves, it's a family owned business. They're throwing Bates reels on a lot of their rods now.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff you might see may have, Bates reels and the content. Exactly but Bates is a company out of Texas, and what really kind of like drew me to wanting to try out their product. They're very high end reels. So I mean, we're not talking; they're expensive, $300 plus reel. But they mill them out of a solid block of aluminum.
That's neat.
Yeah. So when we talk sensitivity, that took it even up another level, which really I don't know if I was expecting that, but like when you have a body of a reel that's mostly plastic and then you swap that out for one that's just a block of aluminum, now you're and I hold the reel. I don't know, like I know Jeff uses the trigger and he holds his hand on the grip behind the reel, but I actually hold the reel in my hand when I'm bass fishing, especially. So like I feel more now because of that as well. But those reels are just like, they're bulletproof. I mean, they really hold up well. A lot of folks in Texas are using them to wade fish for trout, which, you're in the water at that point. Like that reel is getting dunked constantly.
Wow.
And, so just knowing that they've like that level of quality and also an American company that's assembling here in the U.S. And so they came out with their Hundo, which is a really small, lightweight reel in their lineup. And man, that thing has just blown me away. But I only have one of them right now. I have one Hundo and several other reels, but I'm slowly trying to replace my Chronarchs with the Hundos from Bates.
Yeah. So the Hundo 100 is it comes in at quite a price range of
$349, I think.
It's up there. I don't know what conversion is right now because I want to say, is that US or is that Canadian? It says $515. So
I don't think that's US. Now they did launch a saltwater one, but all of theirs are really. So their reels, like they have the salty Hundo and the regular Hundo. The regular Hundo is probably on par with most reel companies that claim their reel is saltwater capable.
Yeah, there you go.
Where their salty would be like going to like a dedicated saltwater reel from Shimano, like
$375.
Yeah, like a Tranks or something like that. Tranks from Shimano is a dedicated like saltwater quality reel supposed to be. And,
my favorite Shimano reel was the Scorpion MGL. That is like
the magnesium spool on that one too. I think.
That one's awesome. It's ultra light, and it fits well in the hand, and you can cast just about anything with it, no matter how light and like heavier, and it just throws things like a country mile. Like it is impressive. And so it's that with being like having a solid block of aluminum, So this is kind of interesting here, because like when you look at most reels, they're made through like multiple parts, like not just the internals of it. Like you have that the actual like housing, we'll call it.
Yeah.
That housing is multiple parts screwed together. You know, you might have a little plastic, you might have some metal on it, if that. But to have a solid block of aluminum,
Let's cut it down.
your sensitivity has to be like unreal.
Thing. I have the hundo on a Judge with carbon fiber grips, carbon reel seat, and titanium guides. So really, in all honesty, and I'm blessed. Again, I'm not bragging when I tell you how much this setup would probably cost if I had to buy it. The folks at Bates were nice enough to gift me a hundo. And it's why I only have one, because I'm like, I don't know if I can afford to buy one now that I love this thing. And then I've worked with Rain Shadow, and they've been great to me for years. And they built me these amazing rods and have allowed me to really, pick the components that I would like dream of, And so I have this titanium guides, carbon fiber reel seat and grips on one of their lightest blanks. So already this rod weighs nothing, right? I mean, this thing is like you can't get it any lighter unless you don't put guides on it, And then I take the hundo, which is like one of the lightest reels that I've ever held. And it's also a solid block, like of aluminum. And then you put braid on that, you feel everything. Like, I mean, it's just like, it's almost like overwhelming, like sensitivity overload, but it is awesome. But it's just the reels are really smooth. They're great guys. I got to hang out with them at ICAST and meet them a couple times, and just a good company. And it's who you want to spend your money with. But I understand not everybody is going to drop $350+ on a reel. It's a lot of money.
It is.
And I know there's a lot of brands, and I actually, when people come to me and they ask me, hey, I want a good versatile, spinning rod setup, I think Penn is a good way to go. Like a Penn Battle's $100, $120 probably now, and it'll go saltwater, it'll do freshwater. There are options out there. It weighs a ton compared to some of the higher end stuff, but they're easily accessible, they're inexpensive, and they'll get the job done. It's just the fact that I spend so much time on the road, so much time on the water, and we rely on our gear, right? Yeah. I mean, from a standpoint of this is a way I make a living, and so I need my stuff to work when the camera's rolling. But and I think a lot of people feel that way. You work hard for your money. You want to be able to go out and enjoy your time off, and you don't want to be out there mad because your bird's nesting every 2 seconds because your reel's messed up, and or you go to set the hook on a big fish and a guide pops on your rod. You're investing in that time that you have off work, I guess.
Well, why not have, if this is your job, why not have the best tools? You know what I mean?
Well, with the fence company, we have, we've learned that you buy your ratchet set that's going to hold up and has a warranty, and because you're using it every day, and so
you pay for what you get.
You do. And there's some, obviously there's sometimes you're paying for a name, but I think you really do. If you're buying from a reputable brand, you do get what you pay for. And there's great options really from all price points. But for me, I've always been stuck because, like you mentioned, that reel, like I haven't got to really try out a lot of different reels, because once you start narrowing down, like I want something that's lightweight that I can take comfortably and fish for smallmouth with, but I also want to catch a 50-inch bull red in saltwater with it. And then it's like, okay, well, you just narrowed that field down to what reels are capable of handling.
Well, and there you go. Like, once again, we're getting back to versatile rods, being able to not just fish multiple techniques, fish multiple techniques, but to be able to cover an array of species. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And not everybody does that. A lot of people are focused.
I don't fish other, like I would catch pike, I do walleye, but I mainly fish for river smallmouth. That's what I do. That's what I enjoy doing. Like you said, spend your time outside of work. I want to be on the river chasing smallmouth. But if I were to look at rods and I'd be like what I had in my collection, I was like, well, maybe I could, I could probably do the, but you brought up a great point, just versatile, but light reels, less fatigue, because you want those reels to also, like you're saying, you may have some spooled up with like 60 pound. Well, you're probably not throwing a 1/4 ounce football jig with 60 pound braid. You know what I mean? You're probably chucking something of much larger, profile bait, or even something with more weight, and you're throwing that a lighter rod with a lighter reel, more sensitivity, less fatigue for the actual angler at the same time.
Yeah, so it's we think about it the same way, and a lot of people don't paddle anymore and even I don't paddle as much now. We've got motors and pedal drives and everything else. But you think about it from that standpoint too. It's a very similar situation. A paddle sports shop owner in Louisiana, his name's John. He shared something called swing weight with me one time. And so, you pick up 2 paddles side by side, right? And one is a few ounces lighter or whatever than the other. And you're holding them like this. And you're trying to, you're in the store and you're like, well, this isn't that much of a difference. But no one paddles, holds it up like that to paddle, right? And so he said, okay, now all you do is I want you to take that paddle and I want you to hold it, the way you would if you were paddling, but with only one hand, and then rotate it back and forth and feel the swing of what it takes. And then you really notice a difference between, let's say a fiberglass shaft paddle with heavy plastic blades, and then you pick up a carbon paddle with carbon blades or fiberglass blades, and you're doing that with one in each hand. You really feel the difference then of that swing weight. And it's the same with rods. If you pick 2 rods up in the store with no reel on them and you got no line, you got no bait, you're like, well, I can't really tell a difference. Well, go out and fish with those all day, and then, tell me which one felt different. And you will notice a difference. I mean, it is noticeable. But it also, again, comes in, I could go down like a rabbit hole of why I think certain components on rods are silly or whatnot, but everybody has their own thing. And I'm not saying that they're right or wrong, but one of the things I don't understand is I see a lot of people with the wind grips or what I call like a golf club style grip.
I know.
And I don't really, I mean, I guess it's comfortable in the hand, but the whole purpose of that material is to absorb vibration.
Yeah.
So when you swing a golf club, you don't want to feel that, when you hit the ball, you want it to absorb and be comfortable in your hand, right? Well, the whole purpose of a fishing rod is so you can feel that bite. And if you're taking vibration out of the rod, to me, it's like, if I could just hold the blank, I would, and I actually don't have any grip at all on any of my spinning rods. I have a reel seat and a rod blank and a little tiny butt cap about that big. No grip whatsoever, because I want to feel everything I can. And so that's why I've kind of went more towards the corks and the carbon fiber, because they're denser and you're going to transfer that vibration, a little bit more. So yeah, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but I was the same thing with reels. It's like lighter weight, you're going to feel more, you're going to catch more fish.
No, I was, like I said, I had the whole basis of our conversation here. I was just going to share something here. See if I can share a slide. All right, so this is a great example right here of Jameson setups. So here he's got 4 rods, all with braid. 1 spinning, 3 casting, and he's got a quick selection of baits, and you've nailed, you know what I mean? Like you've nailed that there. And the reels, like, to me, that's just a very simple setup. You know, it's very and it just very effective at the same time. So as we narrow down in this podcast, I wanted to ask you, so what's going on next with the road trip angler? What's going on with Jameson? Like, what can we expect?
Yeah, so I mentioned we're moving into our 4th season. We're trying to really double down and focus on YouTube and grow it. And, you know, our goal is to release a video every week. And we've done that so far this year, except for I did miss this week. So I feel like I've missed one of those. So I'll have to double down 1 week so I still have that average, right? But yeah, just to continue to grow and inspire. Like, we actually, you know, our focus for the show, when we create content, is really 3 pillars of content. We want to educate with tips, share whatever little tidbits of knowledge that I've gathered along the way and stole from other anglers, to be honest. We want to inspire people to get outside. You know, I really hope that, and it's great to hear from you that, you know, our interaction, like if anything I do can help someone or encourage someone to get out on the water, to go fishing, to try a new bait, to try a new species, or go on a new trip, you know, and then hear that feedback, that, you know, is definitely one of the things we want to do. So inspire, educate, and then we want to, you know, help people make better decisions when it comes to spending their money. You know, like, I've been blessed to get a lot of these products sent to be able to test out. So if I can go out there and I can review a product and take some of that information and say, this is who I think this is for, and keep you from making the mistakes that I've made and buying the Commander 120 to go river fishing, man, you know, and
such a cool boat.
It is, but it wasn't the right boat for that application. And so if I can help, you know, do those things, if I can just do those things with the content that we put out on the channel, then, you know, that's really what our focus is moving forward. We are kind of stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit and trying some other types of vessels too this year. So we've been adding some inflatable boats and inflatable kayaks and even rafts into the mix. But really, it's always been about the right tool for me, and that's where kayaks came in. It was a tool to be able to access water. And so it's been fun to step out of that a little bit and just see what other options are out there and who they might fit really well. A giant bug just like flew right by my face. I don't know if you saw that. But yeah, I think that's the focus and goal, is to, you know, keep expanding, you know, keep getting after it, and just keep sharing those things through YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, and with the show.
Well, I gotta say thank you very much for coming on the River Run podcast. It is always awesome to sit down and chat with you, and I look forward to hearing more about your adventures. I look forward to hearing about your latest video regarding why kayak anglers should use braid. Go check it out. You can find Jameson all over the place. You can find him on Instagram. You can find him on the Road Trip Angler YouTube. You can also find him on TV, Bally Sports, and PBS. Is there anywhere else anybody can find you? Like, you got Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram is just Jameson Redding Fishn on Facebook. But I think you pretty much covered it. I think up in Canada it's Wild TV and Water Network. Is that
Water Network, or is it the Fishing Network?
You might be. I don't know. I think there's more. There's Wild TV, and there might be one more in Canada, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. So don't quote me on
that. That's all right. They, like most of us up here, we all have YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. So I will make sure to link all of that in the description.
I appreciate that.
But yeah, no. For the River Run podcast, this has been another great episode. Thank you to my guest, Mr. Jameson Redding. At the same time, don't forget, you can check out Paddle and Finn on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. You can watch this on the Paddle and Finn YouTube channel. You can also check this out on the River Run Podcast TV channel on YouTube. Check it out. It's there. Hit me up with a like and a subscription. You'll find more videos like this, podcasts. Check them out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all through the Paddle and Fin Network. The Paddle and Fin Network has shows right Monday through Saturday, Sunday, you name it. We've got it. We've got a show for you. So from myself, I'm your host, Adam Fraser, my guest, Mr. Jameson Redding, and we are saying see you later until the next episode. Take care.